what's up? What's going on? Maybe got back at again for the stream. I'm gonna go downstairs and get some water. I'm gonna be doing this for a while. We got another stream. We got another World War II documentary. I wanted to do Sir Horatio Nelson because the last stream I did got me like in a piratey mood, got me in a sailor mood. I know he's one of the best. Look at the 2 new posters I got. When I went to the movies to see Transformers, they gave me an Aleda poster for free and a Sonic the Hedgehog 3. It's Shadow riding a motorcycle. They gave these 2 for free. I'm super stoked about them. My wall's getting kind of filled. We got One Piece stuff up there. Got bounties. Got Rick and Morty, AOT, JoJo's. We're getting a lot up there. I'm really proud about that. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Horatio Nelson. We might do that next week if you're interested in seeing more like sailor history videos. Because like I said, I'm really into sailors. People on the seas, those were my guys. So if you're looking forward to Sir Horatio Nelson, let me know in the comments. If you don't want to see Horatio Nelson, let me know in the comments. Let me know what type of things you guys would be into, what things you would find interesting. So I know that's what y'all want to see, because I want to see anything. I'll watch any documentary about anything. So I just got to figure out what you guys like so we can enjoy it together. But without further ado, we're going back to my favorite period in like all of human history, World War II. Today we have an animated documentary about the Stalingrad battle, which I've of course heard of, but like most of these videos have very limited knowledge on it because it's not like a, oh yay, America's the great guy thing. So we don't really learn about it like that. Or America's the villain thing. Those are really only 2 history lessons we get growing up, unless you take a lot of world history classes. I took a couple U.S. history classes, but world history, I only took like 1 or 2 of those. And there was just history. Most of history is just U.S. history. Learning in like late elementary and early middle school. It's all just U.S. history. But enough yapping, enough chatter. We got this documentary, and I was set up this time. I remember to do it before I started the stream. So shouts out to me. The deadliest battle in history. I hope this whole thing isn't in Russian.
Позади меня рушатся городские стены. Я снова с винтовкой в руке, вместе с товарищами.
I never watch these things in advance because I don't want to spoil myself on anything. I want to learn with you guys.
Город не должен пасть. Фашисты не должны пройти.
I'm gonna be incredibly upset if this whole thing's in Russian.
Сражались 5 месяцев. 5 месяцев мы истекали кровью. 5 месяцев мы боролись за каждую комнату в каждом доме. Мы потеряли друзей, свои семьи.
Okay, but if this is for the Russian perspective, prepare for a copious amount of bias and propaganda. I like to try and find like non-biased reviews of history, but it's impossible to find non-biased accounts of history because every piece of history is so filled with propaganda that when you find anti-main, like if you listen to like the main narrative, it's filled with propaganda one way, and the anti-narrative is probably pumped with propaganda more in the other way to try and balance it out, rather than just giving a unbiased, clear account of history. So if it is from a Russian perspective, prepare for a lot of pro-Allies bias.
Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the armchair historian.
Ooh, English!
The Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union dragged on. Hitler and his high command found themselves falling short of critical objectives. Operation Barbarossa was meant not only to seize Soviet territory, but, more critically, to to supply the Third Reich with desperately needed raw materials, namely oil. Germany was running out of fuel, even with their junior partner, Romania, pouring over 100,000 tons of oil barrels into Germany's collective tank. As the Wehrmacht burned through their meager supplies, Hitler and High Command turned their gaze toward capturing the oil fields of Caucasia. The summer of 1942 would see the Nazis focus their efforts on the southern Soviet Union, with the goal of capturing these oil fields, a plan better known as Fall Blanc, or Case Blue. However, Hitler would later add another objective, the capture of the city of Stalingrad, a logistical center named for his communist frenemy. In this video, we will focus on the bloody and brutal Battle of Stalingrad, as two dictators send their men into a meat grinder for the sake of oil and renown. Before we hit
I love how we call Stalin his frenemy.
Our friends over at Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video.
When he hated everything Russia stood
for.
for.
Champions for you to play as. Prepare for epic conflicts against
Which is kind of like how the
the
whole rise of fascism happened to combat communism and the things the Soviet Union were doing.
Epic champion. Of Stalingrad. The city of Stalingrad, formerly known as Tsaritsyn, was not originally part of Nazi plans for Case Blue. Though an important transport hub hosting a number of factories and steelworks, the initial drafts of Case Blue were focused entirely on securing the Caucasian oil fields. The Volga-hugging city of 500,000 inhabitants just didn't figure into German plans. With the failure of Operation Barbarossa still fresh in their minds and the front line stagnating, the dawn of spring meant it was time for a new push into the Soviet Union. This push involved an Axis army of 1.3 million men, 300,000 of whom were soldiers from Italy, Romania, Hungary, and Croatia, advancing towards Astrakhan before securing their northern flank along the Don and the Volga, then advancing south toward the Caucasus. The ever-erratic Hitler, however, decided this plan was far too simple and ordered Army Group South split in two so they could achieve both objectives simultaneously. The newly christened Group A would drive for the Caucasus Mountains in the south, while Group B would make for the Astrakhan by way of the Don and Volga. Satisfied that he had complicated his generals' lives sufficiently, Hitler let the offensive begin on June 28th. The Soviets were taken completely by surprise, and found the second verse of the Nazi invasion the same as the first. The Germans made rapid progress into Soviet territory, and by mid-July, the German 6th Army under Friedrich Paulus was within striking distance of Stalingrad. Hitler ordered Stalingrad to be taken on July 23rd.
I kind of want to re-download World at War.
Manufacturing, Stalingrad served as an artery in the Lend-Lease system that saw Allied supplies shipped to the Soviets by way of Iraq. But Hitler's 6th Army was growing weaker with every instant. German supply lines were stretched so thin that in a grim omen of things to come, some Germans resorted to eating their horses. In addition, a full quarter of Paulus's casualties thus far had been due to typhus and dysentery, which dug their claws deep into both German and Soviet forces. Speaking of Soviets, Stalin had predicted Hitler's change of strategy and was making preparations. Factories churned out a tidal wave of tanks, and reserves were brought in to reinforce Stalingrad. On July 27th, Stalin issued the infamous Order 227, commanding all Soviet soldiers to take not a step back, and laid down heavy penalties for officers who retreated without approval. The command was given in direct response to an idea that was sweeping the dispirited Red Army. The Soviets should outrun the Nazis, retreating deeper and deeper into the vast territories of the Soviet Union until the most advantageous time to fight presented itself, or the will to fight did. In his order, Stalin countered this narrative with one of his own. Russian civilians forced under the German yoke were cursing the Red Army for abandoning them in their time of most desperate need. The workers of Russia called on their soldiers to fight. Back in Stalingrad, these same civilians were conscripted to dig trenches or work emergency shifts in arms factories. After nearly a month of preparations on both sides, the Germans and their allies crossed the Don River on August 21st, setting the stage for one of the bloodiest, actually the bloodiest fight in history.
Yeah.
The Luftwaffe opened the assault on Stalingrad with a multi-day bombing, which reaches its zenith on August 23rd. 600 bombers of Luftflotte 4 level massive swaths of the city, killing between 40 to 75,000 people. German spearheads draw close to the city not long thereafter, encountering fanatical resistance before driving to the Volga on the northern side, and are promptly cut off by the communists. A pocket forms around this spearhead, and troops under General Gustav Anton von Wiedersheim are encircled. 2 days later,
Yo, this animation is kind of crazy.
an attack on the southern side of the city, only for the Russians to turn him back. A second armored spearhead manages to break through the northern pocket and drop off critical supplies, but the would-be rescuers abandon the pocket when it becomes clear they did not bring sufficient infantry to hold their position. The Soviets to the south slowly lose men to the northern front line, with the final division remaining in the sector belonging to the NKVD. The secret police are soon reassigned to the northern sector as well, and the drawdown gives Hoth an opening. As the civilian population breaks into a panic, he drives northward, ultimately covering 20 kilometers or just under 12.5 miles. The Soviet commander, Yeremka, withdraws his men to better defensive positions within the city as the Germans advance. August ends with Paulus' 6th Army breaking into the northern encirclement, relieving their comrades after a week of dug-in fighting. The German lines solidify, and as September begins, the Nazis partially encircle Stalin's city. Georgy Zhukov, future hero of the Soviet Union, launches an attack in the north, meant to break up the German line, and once again encircle the fascists. But the Germans are able to hold fast. Zhukov may not encircle his foes, but he captures their attention and ties down a number of Paulus' men. Hitler, seeing yet another opportunity to complicate matters, dismisses the commander of Army Group B and takes personal command of operations in the north. With the Führer himself as their leader, the Germans continue to make the exact same slow but steady progress into Stalingrad, with the 4th gaining ground to the south. The 29th Motor Division in particular becomes the first German unit to reach the southern shores of the Volga on September 9th. With the 29th in place, the Soviet defenders are split into their constituent groups. The 62nd and 64th Armies find themselves cut off from each other, with the 62nd reliant on supplies ferried across the Volga, supplies that must make their way through intense German fire. The 62nd is woefully understrength, with their only complete division being the NKVD riflemen that were pulled out in the face of Hoth's drive last month. Despite their shortcomings, the 62nd fights hard, resisting the Germans as they push into the suburbs. Vasily Choykov, commander of the 62nd, orders his frontline troops to hug the German lines, keeping in constant contact to prevent the Luftwaffe providing air support, lest they bomb their fellow Aryans. The close quarters leads to intense urban combat, as the Soviets fight the Axis room by room, house by house, opening a brutal new phase of the battle. The Germans reach Stalingrad proper on September 13th. The Luftwaffe
Going through
once
each
again
house?
onto the city, playing a duet of destruction with German heavy artillery. The Soviets respond in kind, counter-barraging with their own guns and Katyusha rockets. Elements of the 6th Army push deep into the city and force the Soviets into a near envelopment. Despite fierce resistance, the Germans capture critical hills.
As much as I love ranting about the U.S. government, I know you guys are probably tired of this, but this is one of the reasons why I think we're so gung-ho about going to war, and we have been since, like, the creation of our nation, is because we don't ever have to deal with this. Your neighbors invading you, running up, going through house by house, going through bombing campaigns. Cause, I mean, who the fuck, Canada? Is Canada gonna be our ops? Like, Canada and Mexico are not pushing up on the U.S. soil like that, at least not without major alliances. So we never, just even the thought of a land invasion and a war fought on our home turf is astonishing. It's like completely heartbreaking to us. Like, the deadliest war for Americans was the Civil War, because both sides were Americans. I think it was like 600,000 died. 2.5 million died in this one battle. So, like, the idea of, like, mass-scale warfare on our home turf is foreign in almost every American's mind. This is why I think they're so gung-ho and so willing to go to war in other places, because they don't know what... I mean, obviously they know what war is like they have the thoughts in their mind, but just the thought of, like, really experiencing it doesn't really fathom to them. This is why we gotta be worried about China buying all of our farmland.
Germans will advance through Stalingrad center, capturing railway stations and driving hard for the Volga. With the 4th providing support in the south, the 6th Army reaches the Volga in just one day, placing the Germans well inside Stalingrad. But all is not sunshine and sauerkraut for the Germans. The Soviets recapture the heights overlooking the city center on September 16th. General von Wiedersheim, who had so nobly commanded the encircled Germans at the opening of the assault, is sacked when he posits the Germans will ultimately fail to take Stalingrad and suggests a withdrawal from their Volga positions.
You didn't like that.
Matters, a group of 50 Soviet soldiers fortify a grain elevator, famously holding off the Germans as their offensive begins to slow. The ragged Soviets in the grain elevator would hold out for another 4 days until the Germans finally cleared them on the 21st.
This is completely unrelated to the video we're watching, but I just looked at the weather. I Uber drive for most of my money, and it's going to be storming for at least the next 48 hours straight. Like, I was hoping like there would be like some small patch, like 3 hours, where I can go out and drive in like maybe a light drizzle or no rain. Nah, this hurricane from Florida is completely fucking shit up. I wonder how bad it is down there in Florida if it's raining like that up here.
An apartment block that would come to be known as Pavlov's house. Pavlov's would hold out until November.
Oh shit, Pavlov.
Within a siege of 60 days. The Germans end September
60 days?
Stalingrad and preparing for a final push into the industrial heartland of the city. The beleaguered Soviets are reinforced by the 1047th Rifle Regiment, who cross the Volga on the 22nd. They are not the only reinforcements the Soviets can expect, however. The temperature in Stalingrad begins dropping, the icy winds a dispatch from the Russians' old ally, General Winter. These gales provide a fitting prelude to a storm gathering in the Russian camp. For almost the entire month of September, in utmost secrecy, Joseph Stalin, Georgy Zhukov, and the Stavka, the Russian High Command, have been formulating plans for a counteroffensive, and they're almost ready to make their move. As the Soviet reinforcements continue to make their way into Stalingrad, Paulus launches an assault on the industrial sector. The reinforced Soviets push the Nazis back, and on October 4th,
Russia has won so many wars just thanks to fucking Winter.
Casualties that it has lost all offensive capability. The German halt
niggas beat Napoleon.
10 days to rest and resupply.
The Napoleon with just Winter.
By Hoff that sees the Fourth Army finally reach the Volga. The rest of October will be a hard slog for the Germans and Soviets both, as the Germans renew their assault on the industrial district and begin to make headway. The Germans pay dearly for every minute they advance, and the bombing raids by the Luftwaffe that had opened the battle bear bitter fruit. Goering's aces leave a trail of destruction in their wake that inadvertently shifts the battle ever so slightly in the favor of the Soviet defenders.
I say that.
The communists fortify or hide in hollowed out.
It got me thinking, are the Nazis the most effective military of all time?
Line of defenses and traps that force the Germans to advance methodically and fight nose to nose.
At least like in war. I'm sure like
the German advance through the
if there was a land invasion on US, we could do pretty well good as well.
By the 11th, the Soviets are pushed into isolated pockets
Germany
of
is a
resistance in
small
factories and
country.
houses. Pockets the Germans throw assault after assault at. Assaults that Soviets repel time and again before ultimately failing. The Germans,
but like
low on
their
men,
industrial
material, and
complex
willpower,
back then
begin
was
to stumble.
insane.
A week later, the Soviets hold only a stretch of the shoreline at the Volga, no more than 10% of the city. The Russians
they went to war with like all of Europe.
Too battered and undersupplied to press
Italy's
their assault.
help.
Paulus could count over
Fucking
60,000
Italy?
casualties.
That's
in
your
the Sixth
backup?
Army alone. Both the Germans and besieged Russians
In Japan?
settle into rhythms of
And y'all taking on all of Europe?
side aware of the earth-shattering events to come. As General Winter covers Stalingrad in a raging blizzard, Zhukov springs his long-prepared trap. The Soviets launch their mammoth counteroffensive, appropriately dubbed Operation Uranus, at 3 o'clock on November 19th.
Bro's pulling out the ancient weapons.
Totaling 1 million men, almost 1,000 tanks, and over 1,000 planes wash over the Germans like a crimson tide, looking to break out and lock the Nazis in a pincer over a 400-kilometer or 248-mile front. Uranus is timed perfectly, as the frigid winds serve a natural coolant for the tanks, allowing them to drive harder and farther. The Allies land in North Africa at the same time, splitting the attention of High Command in Berlin. Over the course of 3 days, the Soviets succeed in completely reversing the fortunes of the battle, tearing into the Axis lines to encircle 40,000 Romanian troops protecting the Germans' southern flank before driving their pincers into an almost total encirclement of the 4th and 6th Armies. Paulus is presented with a fateful decision: attempt a breakout or dig in and wait for the metaphorical cavalry. As the noose begins to tighten around him, High Command begins entertaining the idea of resupplying the 6th Army by air, an idea that would lay the foundation for the 6th Army's destruction. In a conference on the 23rd, Luftwaffe Chief of Staff Hans Jeschenek guarantees Hitler the delivery of 500 tons of supplies per day to their forces in Stalingrad, despite Paulus estimating he needs 700 and the Luftwaffe's own estimate that they could manage 300 at best. The message reaches the Führer just as High Command convinces him that a breakout is the only way to salvage the situation. Buoyed by his Air Force's confidence, Hitler approves the airlift. The Luftwaffe begins dropping critical stockpiles of ammunition and fuel, but no food.
Joseph would soon backtrack his recommendation, but Hitler would have none of it. Who was absent when it made his initial lofty promise, total line subordinate in the face of Hitler's enthusiasm for the aircraft.
As the encirclement drags on, the German army starves. Bread rations are slashed in desperation, and the men begin dining on sumptuous feasts of horse fat. Wounded men awaiting medevac are placed into thin tents next to supply runways, and as General Winter marches on the German forces, the wounded freeze to death in their cots.
Yeah. That Winter, man. That Winter done Russia so many favors.
Overall commander of the German military. Paulus complains that he had not received any communication from High Command for over 36 hours, and that Hitler had denied his request for freedom of action. Paulus asks von Manstein to relieve his besieged force, or else formally order him to attempt a breakout. For his part, Manstein is confident that the 6th Army can hold their position with the Luftwaffe airdrops as their lifeline, confidence that will soon be put to the test. As the Germans starve and the Soviets advance, the Battle of Stalingrad enters its brutal conclusion. As winter well and truly sets in, the supply situation in the German pocket becomes dire. The 3,500 Soviet POWs who have survived long enough to be held by the Germans within their encirclement are officially cut off from all rations, as the Germans must get every scrap of food into their own bellies. The Soviets resort to melting snow, which is contaminated by debris and urine, for water, and cannibalizing on their own dead comrades. Meanwhile, the Germans guarding them begin venting their rage on their prisoners, brutalizing them with their weapons and dogs. When the Battle of Stalingrad ends, only 30 Soviet POWs will be liberated by their comrades. But that is months from now, as the snow piles up around him, and the Luftwaffe finally begins delivering desperately needed supplies of food. Paulus takes stock of the 6th Army. 34,000 of 300,000 who marched on Stalingrad are still alive. On December 12th, von Manstein launches Operation Winter Storm, an attempt to break through to Paulus and relieve the Germans trapped in Stalingrad. Paulus
89% mortality rate.
And once again, he is refused. The 6th Army could only wait for liberty or destruction. There are no other options. Von Manstein drives for Stalingrad, and after a week is bogged down by the Soviets in a mere 48-kilometer or 29 miles from the city. New offensives waylay von Manstein further, and the dutiful Paulus continues to follow his Führer's orders to stay put. As Christmas arrives in Stalingrad, General Winter makes a special delivery to the Nazis. On Christmas Day, 1,300 men die of frostbite en masse. The Soviets bring presents of their own, launching an endless stream of harassing attacks and probes. As they freeze to death or are shot by the Soviets, one can imagine the German soldiers ardently wishing for St. Nicholas to bring them some coal. At least they could burn it for warmth. The new year would only bring new misery for the Germans. Bands of soldiers roam the ruined streets looking for food and warmth. Thousands of wounded languish, untreated due to lack of supplies. The Soviets offer the Germans a generous surrender, giving Paulus the chance to save his men and himself from certain death at the hands of General Zhukov or General Winter. The proud Prussian refuses, and on January 6th, the Soviets launch a new wave of attacks that carve the 6th Army into pieces. As his men are forced into two disparate pockets, Paulus's supply situation worsens. The Soviet attacks force his soldiers to abandon critical airfields, and even if they could be held, the Luftwaffe begins throttling back on supply drops, decreasing the tonnage dropped as the encirclement drags. On the 22nd, the Soviets again solicit a surrender, and Paulus sends a message to Hitler that his men have no ammunition nor food, and that his ability to command them is degrading by the moment. 2 days later, he reports that he has 18,000 wounded left completely untreated, and begs Hitler for permission to surrender his men to the Soviets. Hitler orders Paulus to hold his position. To the last man, the last cartridge. Not a day later, the Soviets capture the last remaining airfield that the Germans can use to receive airdrops. Whatever Paulus has in his stores was all he ever will. Throughout the encircled 6th and 4th, 100,000 men die, in January alone. And the two armies have been split into northern and southern pockets with no way of communicating. As Paulus struggles with Hitler's order not to surrender, he receives a most unwelcome surprise, a promotion from Hitler himself to Field Marshal. But instead of an honor, it was a death sentence. as no field marshal had ever surrendered or been captured alive before. With the stroke of his pen, Hitler orders Paulus to place himself upon to order his men to stand down. The southern pocket collapses under the weight of Paulus's capture, but the northern hangs on, barely.
Oh no, we're good. I don't know what that was. I thought we weren't good for
The
it.
next day, General Karl Strecker, de facto commander of the northern pocket, gathers his staff to tell them of the southern collapse. He issues a general order empowering all troops under his command to act according to the dictates of their conscience, a flowery way of saying surrender if you want to live, without actually uttering the words. And that is exactly what Strecker does on February 2nd. The 6th Army formally surrenders to Georgy Zhukov, but 11,000 Germans refuse to give up the fight, going to ground in the ruins of Stalingrad. There is no
they real,
resistance or desperate grab at victory, however. These were Germans fearful of Soviet reprisal. With no central command nor mission other than survival, these holdouts would hide in the ruins and sewers by day and scavenge what they could at night. Their lives were desperate and violent, engaging in running gunfights.
You gotta just,
and scratching for meager
do you really want to be a Soviet prisoner of war?
For the Soviets to root out these renegade Germans and fully secure Stalingrad.
Honestly, ducking and hiding in the sewers might be better.
The population of Stalingrad fared little better than the men in uniform. Though there were sporadic evacuations of civilians throughout the battle, either organized by the Germans or Soviets, or in panicked response to the shifting tides of battle, the loss of life was still enormous. 170,000 civilians died in the Battle of Stalingrad, and this number includes those who died after the war, after being enslaved by the Germans and marched to forced labor camps in the Ukraine and elsewhere. While the Soviet POWs under German care had been almost annihilated, the Germans would fare no better. 95% of the men captured by the Soviets at the end of the battle wouldn't see home again.
Yeah, I was about to say, are you going to talk about the ones that got captured by the Soviets?
Fed by human life and misery. But it was also a testament to the fighting spirit of those on the ground, as the Soviets clung by their very fingernails to the city and threw the Germans back.
So, that was definitely one of my favorite videos we watched so far. Just like the cinematography of it. But that was heavy. That was extremely, extremely heavy. Yikes. I mean, that's war, man. That's why World War II is the greatest, baddest, worst war of all time. Because stuff like that, just the scale of things that can be done during World War II. Which, I mean, is completely dwarfed and made minuscule by the capabilities we possess today in the 21st century, especially in 2024, which is why we need to avoid World War III at all costs, because it's going to get so nasty if that pops off. Just think of... Nah, we don't gotta get into that. We could get into that. Fuck it, we can get into that. Just think about what's happening in Gaza right now. That, not even like the who's right, who's wrong. We all know that. We don't gotta get into that. But just the amount of destruction, full-scale destruction that can be done on a tactical, what do they call it? A tactical expedition, something like that, to gut out a terrorist organization in there. Imagine if it's just a full-on war being waged, using the best weapons, the most advanced technology. We might touch 1 billion if we kick off into World War III. I'm not even talking about nuclear capabilities, just pure fighting, the drone capability, the different type of guns we have access to, how explosive the tanks are, and submarines, and all of that type of stuff. Drones, the manned aircrafts. I think we could touch 1 billion just fighting. No nukes being fired. So we need to avoid that at all costs. Because World War II was nasty and vicious. And I think we've at least doubled our capability for violence since then as a society. But that being said, Stalingrad, I think this is the most obviously it was the deadliest. I think it's the most popular battle of World War II. If you like to see other World War II battles, I wouldn't mind streaming those if that's what you guys are into. D-Day invasion maybe? That's obviously like the most famous, just the one that ended the war. Maybe we could do some aircraft, like some Air Force battles. I don't know how much y'all are into that, but I'm a huge fan of sea fighting, like Navy battles, Air Force battles, strategic land battles. I just might be a battle type of guy. So if y'all are into different historical battles, leave some in the comments and I'll be glad to react to them. But that's all we got for tonight. If you enjoyed this video, please like and sub to the channel if you are new. We do this every Wednesday. We do manga every Friday. And we do anime every Monday. If y'all into any of that, I would love to have y'all on Twitch and in the chat. And until next time, I'll catch y'all. Y'all be safe. Y'all be easy. Peace out.